Welcome, everybody, to a, for me, unique conversation with Judith Weston that I was dreaming since a long time. Let me give you just a short introduction about Judith and me and why we're doing this. Judith is, for me, one of the most important teachers I ever met. She's not only teaching acting, directing actors, but she's an actress and a great book author of the books Directing Actors and The Director's Intuition. The workshops directing acting years ago in Berlin was one of the best I ever experienced. This is not only for me, so because I know a lot of friends who said this was the best workshop they ever took. And this is the reason why I want to do this conversation, because I want you to get in touch with this wonderful person, this wonderful woman and wonderful teacher. Yeah, for me, acting is at the heart of everything in our life. It is very important. Therefore, I want to explore a bit more about the secrets of acting and the great move when you go inside of acting. And by the way, my name is Uwe Walter. I'm Judith's co-publisher for the German edition. We're friends for more than 20 years. I'm coaching storytelling and entrepreneurs. So, Judith, this was a short introduction, and I'm so glad to talk to you. Thank you so much for the time, and I appreciate it very much. So, how are you?
I'm great. I'm great. It's so good to be in touch with you again, Uwe. I remember the times when I came to Berlin and you were my host, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful experiences. I always remember you driving me around Berlin,
Yeah,
hiring a taxi and driving us around so that I could see what a unique and amazing city it
yeah.
was. It was very,
And it was so beautiful because, it was the first time for me and all the participants, I guess, to really get in touch with yourself. Because as you created these wonderful exercises in acting, we had to go inside of ourselves. We had fared, we didn't know how to do this. And then the people came from all over Europe. We had to jump into the situation, into the
right.
scene. And we had to do the learning before. And Uwe, you never stop the scene. I do it. So if you're scared, jump in. So how did you become such a great teacher? Is there a
Gosh.
situation? Is there a situation where you started thinking about, wow, I'm an actress. Why should I do this? Or how did it go along?
Oh gosh. Well, you know, I think for myself, the pole star, the touchstone of my teaching was that I always believed that acting was a good thing for anyone to do, whether or not they wanted to be an actor, and that it was a good way to approach the world, to learn about the world, to understand the behavior of other people, and to understand the behavior of characters, certainly, but even if you didn't become an actor, to understand the behavior of other people. And that was how I started taking acting classes myself, was, without any goal of becoming, a professional actress, without any goal of making money at it. It was a long time ago. It was the early 70s. And in those days, people were of my generation, the baby boom in the United States. We were kind of lost. We were kind of wandering around, and we were all looking for teachers. And then I found a teacher. Somebody said, "Oh, there's this wonderful teacher. You should go to her." And she happened to be teaching an acting class. I mean, if she'd been teaching a ceramics class, I might have gone to her. It was her name is Jean Shelton. And I might have gone to her no matter what she was teaching, and she happened to be teaching acting. And of course, I had done acting when I was a kid, in simple circumstances in school plays and things. But uh, but she, I got a lot of permission from her to she was very wise, and I felt she gave me a lot of permission to be, to if I was teaching, to give people my wisdom, that I felt that was part of teaching acting, that it was a lot through her, that she that that I felt like I had permission to talk about characters in a way that let people know what I really believed about the world and what I really understood about relationships and about people's behavior. And I felt like I had a lot to offer with that. I was an actress for a while. And when I started teaching, I wanted to be like her. That was basically it. I basically wanted to be like her. I used, from the beginning, some of the exercises she used, or repurposed them and adjusted them to, in my own ways. And of course, I invented some new ones. But I started out with certain exercises that she had used that had impressed me or affected me, and certain principles. So it came a lot from that, but I also I felt from the beginning that I was more myself when I was teaching than when I wasn't, and I had felt that as an actress as well. I felt that I was more myself on stage than in social relationships, that I was more real, that I was more alive, that I was more me when I was on stage than in social relationships. And I felt that even more as a teacher, that I was more myself. And, it's hard for me I'm never sure, how much anybody else would want to hear about this, because it's extremely, extremely personal. That, my own social quietness, my own social shyness had a lot to do with a lonely and dysfunctional childhood. And I think all my life I was fighting my way out of the isolation of that. And, acting was like the first great way to fight my way out of the isolation of that place where I felt in my life where I wasn't heard, where I wasn't understood. And I could bring that to, as an actor. So going back to when I was an actor, I could bring that to characters. I could bring, something that I saw about the character that nobody else, that would be different from what anybody else saw. And no one would know. No one would know what my secret connection to that character was. No one would know. And that was wonderful. So it made me feel like I was being myself on stage, but it also took me out of myself, because, there were other people there. There were other people on stage with me, and there were other people in the audience, and caring about them. I never worried about what they thought about about my performance, but I did always think of performing as a service. I always thought that, and this is something that I think, I don't know. I don't know if other people would be interested in hearing about this, but I tell actors this, to not think of acting as a way to get approval, but, to think of it as a service, as something you give to the audience. And I always felt that. I always felt that just instantly. So that took me out of myself, which I needed to do because I was very isolated. And teaching was even more that, that I could talk about characters. And then I started very early when I was teaching, telling my own stories, my own connection to characters, because I wasn't playing them anymore when I was teaching. I wasn't playing the characters anymore. So I was, talking about them and encouraging people to make them their own. And so I would tell them as an example of how I connected to the character. Not to tell them this is how you should do it, but this is an example of how one might connect to the character. That I understand this character because I've been lonely, and I've been lonely in this particular way, and to tell those stories. And so, it forced me, because I wasn't being a character, so I didn't have that way to hide, to say, well, no one knows what my connection is. And I would tell people what my connection was. And it was an amazing experience that people responded to that, and so that it was a way to feel real in the world. that my experiences, good or bad, and a lot of them were bad, were not for nothing. That uh, they were, that there could be a form in which people could hear them. And yeah, so that's a big part of it for me. I started very early working with the directors, teaching the acting for directors, the course that you took, and I just loved that. I loved this whole situation of bringing the directors and more into the world, the right brain world. You know, because directors are more left brain, rational, uh, and analytical, and more into the right. The actor's world is more the right brain world, you know, impulsive and imagistic, and and then I loved bringing people whose lives were more in the left brain to introduce them to the right brain and bring them over there and let them live there and let them uh, feel safe there. And directors were perfect, because I'd also worked at one time with lawyers. I tried working with lawyers who were very much in the left brain, and they were so in the left brain that they really didn't want to go into the right brain at all, and so it wasn't that much fun. But directors, you know, their right brain is more accessible to them than a lot of other left brain type people, you know, than accountants or or lawyers or producers for that matter. You know, producers are very left brain, and that it's much harder for them often to make that leap into the right brain. But directors, they're fairly close. That, you know, the right brain experience is, it's, you know, they long for it. They long for it. So it was very, very satisfying to have, you know, to have those experiences of you know, making it safe enough for them to take chances and doing that, and to design and my goal with all my exercises was always, you know, to bring them into these very big high risk waters, but very safely, you know, to do it little by little so that they would always feel safe and then feel surprised when they got somewhere else. So that's how I got into teaching the acting for directors, which I don't teach anymore. You know, I don't know if you know this. I stopped teaching it about 2 years ago. Yeah, I gave up my studio and I stopped traveling with that workshop. And I mean, I had done it for 27 years, and I really wanted to stop. It was a really wonderful. I loved that workshop, and I loved developing it. And every time I taught it, I thought up new ways to approach things. You know, I would, you know, something to enrich it and something to add to it, or to, you know, if there had been a problem in a workshop, you know, how do I make that not happen, and or deal with it if it does, and you know, so I was always, gave me a lot of you know, fertile, you know, way to think about things and to grow all the time. But that's what I think that's been the other thing, is that I always thought about what I was doing as learning. That's how I always thought of it, and in fact I could say in some ways that in some ways after 27 years I felt like I had learned, as you know, I was really, really good at teaching the acting for directors class. Nothing could surprise me or take me off my game anymore. And I think in some ways at that point I wanted to go on to something else. So anyway, it was also very exhausting, and I've gotten older. It's very, very exhausting, those long days. And yeah, so that was another important reason to stop doing it.
Of course,
But
and I remember how you capture everything from everybody. You know, you capture the energy, the story. You know how he improves. I thought today you could call it the acting journey. You know, because it's in this 2 day workshop. You know, or a 3 day workshop. You know, it was like a journey. You know, because through several steps, you know, you moved into yourself, moved in different roles, and you start growing and get reconnected, reprogrammed your left and right brain. And for me, it was like the first time in life I didn't felt isolated anymore, because I loved what you said, that it's probably an access to the world, because very often we weren't allowed to say what we really think. We weren't accepted in probably in our childhood. Even somebody doesn't, it was probably not a bad will, but the feel like to be accepted and say what you think, and going inside of this, I think this so.
Yeah, well, I think nobody got enough of that. I think nobody got enough of that, so everybody can access that. I think one thing that made me uniquely able to teach it was that I got much less of it than I think most people did. So in order to fight my way out of that, I had to not just do it, but I had to teach it. I had to really, really make
Work
it
on
my
it.
life.
Hmm.
I had to make it my life in order to not go back, to not backslide into that isolation. But I think for everyone, they've had not been listened to or heard or understood as much as they wanted, as much as they needed. So that I think you're right, that is the way that people spark to that, and spark to acting, and find it fulfilling. Of course, I think everybody should take an acting class, and as long as they can afford to. I don't think everybody should pursue a career in acting.
I
I
know.
don't. I don't think that at all. But I think everybody should, you know, should do, to do some of that, to have that connection, and off and on their whole lives. I really think it's important. And directing is also important. Now with everybody having cameras in their iPhones, everybody should make little movies. But I also don't think that everybody should pursue a career in directing. But I do think that everybody should make little movies. Why not? It's a way to organize your understanding of the world, and it's a great thing to do.
It's wonderful what you're saying. From my point of view, it's all about self-expression and becoming yourself. Because when I was in your acting class, in your directing actors class, for me, one of the most interesting things, and I don't know exactly how to describe it, was getting rid of my self-control. Let it go. Because I feared so much. I didn't know how to go through this magic door. And you said, now start it. And in all exercises we had, it was such an amazing thing. And you can and you know how all these all the people in your classes reacted, how deeply they reacted to this. It's really a kind of a self-birth. I don't know. It's really strange that we're talking very psychologically about that, but true. In fact, really, it's
Well,
a deep thing. Yeah.
I think yes, it's self-expression, but I think it also, it has to be service to the audience. I do believe that. I do feel, and certainly if you're going to make a career of it, you have to care about the audience. You have to love the audience or hate them, whatever. But to have a very vibrant relationship, a wish to serve them, whether it's to serve them, to help them, to love them, or whether it's to, serve them right, get revenge on them, teach them a lesson, whatever it is, there has to be there has to be a desire to give to the audience. So it's not just self-expression.
Of
You
course. Yeah. Yeah. No,
know,
I agree.
there
Beautiful.
needs
It's
to be
both.
a desire
Yes. Yeah.
to give to the audience,
Yeah.
to always keep your mind on that. What am I giving them?
Yeah,
Uh,
service is a very important thing. Even in the hero's journey, you have to you can only concentrate on yourself as an ego. You have to do give a service or be for somebody else. And take roles or help in creating metaphors that help people really to relate to and to grow and to get into catharsis as well. That's
Well, I think that's for some, some filmmakers feel that way. Others don't. I don't think you have to be a nice person to be a filmmaker. I think, that you can be you don't, I really don't think you have to be a nice person to be a filmmaker, but you have to have something that you want to say. Even if what you want to say is that the world is crap and life is bleak, that you have to have something that you and everybody should give up. You have to have something that you want to say that you really believe that that's important to you. But I don't think it has to be always nice. I really don't. But but I think for some people it does. If that's the kind of person you are, then it has to have that. But there is a moral level to it, a moral or spiritual level to everybody, and including the filmmakers that are not nice. That there must be a moral that they're saying to the world, even if the moral is, life is not worth it. Everybody should kill themselves. I think that's an okay moral to have if it's yours. Right? I don't try to distinguish between nice people and not nice people when it comes to filmmaking. I'd always taught about verbs, about intention. Another word for verbs is the intention. And again, I got that from my teacher, and I developed these exercises to get people to to see that the verb has to do with not how you're saying the line, but how you're affecting the other person. And that's a real key to good acting is that that you're affecting somebody else and not just trying to do it right. So and so I'd always taught with verbs, with intention, and made a big deal about it. But then there was one day after I'd been teaching for maybe about 3 or 4 years. So I was still early in what I was doing. No, wait. It would have been, no, maybe 5 years. I guess I'd been teaching for about 5 years. And there was, I had an appointment at my studio. I had a studio, and I had an appointment at the studio. And then I got cut up, and I have a very serious problem with being on time. I really, in order to be on time, I really have to work at it. It's my default position is to be kind of late for everything. So when I got to be a teacher, I just couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't, be late. I had to be on time or even early. And that was really a big part of teaching that was hard for me. But anyway, I had this appointment and I was running late. And, I don't know what happened, if I got distracted and, started daydreaming or maybe there was a phone call. Oh, and I think I was like not on schedule to be early. And then there was a phone call and I had to take it and I couldn't get off the phone with this person. Now this was before cell phones. This is 25 years ago. And so I was at home. I picked up the phone at home. And so I had to stay there and I had to drive to the studio. I knew how long it took. And I knew I was going to be late. And nobody had cell phones. So I just jumped in the car and I was driving over there. And then, there was a red light and this thing was wrong. And I was getting really irritated with myself. And I started rehearsing my apology to this guy who I knew would be waiting there at the studio for me. And I was going over in my mind, I was saying, I'm so sorry, the phone rang and I had to take it and then I couldn't get off and then there was bad traffic and blah, 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 blah. And I was rehearsing it in my mind, maybe out loud. I do talk to myself sometimes. And I started hearing what I was doing. I thought, my idea is to apologize to him, but actually I'm complaining. My verb is to complain. I'm complaining about how I couldn't, this person called the last minute and I couldn't get off the phone. I'm complaining about the traffic and I'm complaining about being embarrassed about being late. And that's what I'm doing. That's my intention, even though it's not my conscious intention. That's how it's coming out. And so I thought, and I'm still in the car and I'm thinking, wait, is that what I want to do? Do I want to complain at this guy? How is that going to make him feel? That's not going to make him feel apologized to. That's not going to, how do I want him to feel? And I thought, well, what I want I want him to feel reassured that I care about his time, that, I want him to feel reassured that I don't take lightly him making a commitment to meet me and being on time for it. I want him to feel reassured that I'm, I want that his time is as important as mine is. And so I thought, well, if I want to reassure him, if I want him to feel reassured, then is complaining going to do that? And I thought, well, no, not at all. It's going to do the opposite. It's going to make him feel irritated, sort of out of sorts, and make him feel like he has to reassure me that he does it's all right that I was late. And so I thought, to apologize is different from to complain, and to reassure is even different more, and that's what so I kind of re-rehearsed it in my mind with the same words and with the intent to reassure him that he mattered. And then I thought, yeah, that's what you should do. And so I don't know, that was a big I've been teaching this for 5 years, but it was a big shift when I thought, yes, this works. It works in real life. This is true in real life. That this concept of intention, it's an odd word to use because we think of intention as one's conscious intention. But at first, my conscious intention was to apologize, but my unconscious intention had crept in, which was to complain. And that, you can choose your intention, you can choose it, and you can execute it, and you can keep your focus on the other person to see if they are being reassured. And it gave me just this huge new level of confidence about teaching verbs, about teaching intention. I thought, and objectives. I thought, yes, this is important. This is an important tool.
Have you seen La La Land, or have you seen Moonlight, or what do you think about the movies at the time? Which one do you like, or what do you see in them?
Oh, I don't know if I want to put this on tape. It would go on the internet, because I have such strong opinions about those two movies. Of course I saw them both, and it was out here in Los Angeles. It was such a thing. Because I'm in the Moonlight camp. I loved Moonlight, and La La Land. I thought was okay, but I didn't have the hugely people in Los Angeles loved that movie so much, and they'd get mad at me if I didn't love it as much as they did. So I've gotten really worried about letting people know I do have certain
constraints
to say about La La Land, but I don't say them publicly.
Yeah, no, but
I certainly enjoyed it while I was watching.
Yes, but we could finish probably with another movie that you like, where you would be able to say some.
Moonlight. Moonlight was
I
definitely movie of the year.
Yes, me too, as well as La La Land. Would you mind to tell what you feel about Moonlight?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. There's so many reviewers that probably have said it so much better than I have. That it's this moment by moment truth. Every moment is true and lived so deeply. I don't know. I think that's all. That there's a human truth in every moment, and it was as far as other things that helped me teach that I learned from life was or things that I taught people. The concept of permission to fail is a big thing that I want to get across to people, and I learned that its importance from my own self as a teacher. That after a few years, when I'd had taught a few, pretty much all the classes I taught, I felt good about afterwards. And then after a few years, you get sort of worried. What if I have an off night? And so I could tell myself when I worried about that, I would say to myself, well, you've had really a lot of good classes. You've really taught a lot of good classes. So if you have an off night tonight, it will be all right. And that was really, really helpful to relax me. And then it would always be okay. And still be another good night of teaching. And so that helped give me the confidence to teach directors and actors that permission to fail is a key, crucial uh, tool, to give yourself and everyone you work with permission to fail. And that, trying to do it right is the worst thing you can do. That, to take risk is right. And then from that, I developed this idea of, looking for opposites, doing it wrong. And those have been very, very helpful concepts for me to help people gain in confidence as directors or as actors. And then the next thing I wanted to talk about was the language of permission, which is something that I teach directors all the time to use, instead of thinking of yourself as even as directing, to think of yourself as disclosing, instead of telling people, this is my idea, this is what, to disclose your ideas. And so, and something that I call the language of permission, which includes using questions instead of orders to actors. So the language of permission, instead of saying do it this way, is to say, well, I wonder what would happen if we tried it this way. Do you think this is worth trying? I'd had this idea that this might be worth trying, instead of this is the way I want it to be. And anyway, I learned how important that was. I mean, I just learned it every day. I learned it every time I taught. And any time I told people do it this way, it just wasn't effective. And if I invited them to it, it was always better. I learned it over and over, trial and error. So and I kept and keep making mistakes about that all the time. I keep relearning that. The language of permission is really, really useful for directors when they're talking to actors, and or to any of the other creative people. And one more thing I wanted to say, and then if you have any other questions, go ahead. I'm not really tired yet. I'm okay if you want to go a little bit longer. I would have to stop in a few minutes. But I wanted to say something because I saw this wonderful movie yesterday, this new Terence Davies movie. I don't know if you're a Terence Davies fan, but I've loved him ever since his first movie, Distant Voices, Still Lives. And he's just come out with a new movie. It's about Emilie Dickinson, and it's called A Quiet Passion. And John and I went to it yesterday and loved it so much. And it reminded me of, besides, I learned many things from my teacher. I learned even more things from life, from being extremely observant about life, extremely observant about other people, and observant about myself and my own motivations. I learned a huge amount by that, and that was natural to me to be observant. It was something I had to do to stay alive, really, was to be observant of other people. What are they going to do when they say this? What do they really mean? I needed to have that skill in order to survive. And I also needed to have that skill towards myself. What are my motivations? Because there were gaps in my social development when I was a child. So there were certain things I wasn't taught, and I had to be constantly, so those are ways. So my teacher, then my powers of observation about other people and about myself and my own motivations. And then another really important place that I learned script analysis was from Shakespeare and Emilie Dickinson. So I thought, especially in honor of seeing that movie yesterday, I wanted to mention that because those are they're very hard to understand it the first time you read them. And I used to, when I was a teacher, when I was in my early years of teaching, my classes were not always full in my early years. I was getting started and I didn't jump into a full practice. So sometimes my classes were small and not full. And when that happened, I would bring in, complete works of Shakespeare, and I would have us read some aloud and figure out what each line meant, which it takes a little while. It takes a little exploring, and you have to unpack the imagery. You have to unpack the imagery. You have to look for clues because it's not spelled out, but it's all clues. And the same with Emilie Dickinson. I used to do that sometimes too. I used to bring in Emilie Dickinson to class and have us, spend 20 minutes or so at the beginning of class, reading poems out loud and unpacking the imagery and unpacking the sentences and figuring out what they really meant. And that, I think, was huge, because I really devoted myself to that. I loved those two artists so much, and I felt like they were saying true things about life and about the world. And so figuring out how to make it accessible, how to make it feel like normal talk when many people feel it's inaccessible, that's how I really, really got better with my script analysis tools, by working on that really difficult material and finding a way that it felt conversational and normal and like a real person talking. So I think that's all I have to say.
Wonderful.
Unless you have a question.
No, that's wonderful hearing your passion for those writers and writings. It's wonderful to hear that. And it will bring me back to both authors as well, because that's true. If you go into those details and you ask what it means, it really helps you to connect different things together. It makes you better. That's true. Yeah, that's truth. Fiction is about truth. And the great writers write about truth, isn't it? It's like
Yes.
you mentioned Moonlight. It's also about truth. It's so truthful how it's realized, the directing and the writing and everything. It's so unbelievable. It touched me very much. Yeah, me too, and much more than La La Land. Even I understand La La Land, but Moonlight was very. In every second you have to breathe deeply. Because it's so truthful. Yeah, and that exists. All the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Secret behavior. Yeah. Anyway. So is there anything else that you wanted to
Do we have a quote that you have very often in mind that you tell to people or so? For example, I have, for example, a word that I like is from Joseph Campbell, where you stumble lies the treasure. Is there a word or a quote that you would like to give us for the end? So we have a.
I know what I want to do. I want to go back to the question you asked me before that I said I didn't want to answer, was, about, how do I get people into their right brain? And, I didn't want to talk about the exercises I did and acting for directors because I'm not doing them anymore. But in the private consultation, I have particular ways. I make them use more emotional words. In the beginning, I ask, what do you love about this script? And they start saying, well, I like that it's this and I like that it's that. And I said, no, I don't care about what you like. I want to know what you love. So I make them, so it's, to make them go to to that more emotional language, and then to always say, where are you in this script? Where are you in this script? What is the hook? Why does it matter that you tell this story? So I found that I can do that with people, and I can do it faster than I used to be able to do it in the acting for directors, because it's one-on-one. The one exercise that from acting for directors that I still use, that I do with people in the private consultation, is to the repeat exercise back and forth. In fact, you and I can do a little bit of that. So you say my name and I'll say your name, and we'll just respond to each other.
Okay, Judith.
Uwe.
Judith.
Uwe.
Judith Weston.
Uwe.
Judith.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So that I find if they haven't taken the acting for directors, that was the main important thing that I could really teach. Is listening, is responding. Instead of thinking of each actor as the, that each that the movie is a set of performances, that it's a set of relationships. So, and that's what I was really trying to get at in the acting for directors, is to to do those two-person exercises. I found I can do it faster now. Just with I just do the exercise with them. But anyway, but now to go back to your last question. This is something that I just was reminded of this morning is, let me see, I wrote it down. So let me find it, make sure I get it exactly right. Is to get it true instead of getting it right. That's, I don't know, if you want a quick watchword, get it true instead of getting it right. Radiant person, Uwe. You're really special and radiant. I love you.
Yeah, I love you too. Yeah, thank you very much for this beautiful time with you and all the time you spent with me and all the worries. I'm glad and thankful for everything.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.